Hey everyone, and welcome back to Speak More Fluently. We're all about helping you find that voice and express yourself with confidence in English. And today we're going to get real about something that I think we can all relate to. It's those common speaking mistakes. Those little hiccups that can sometimes make us feel like, oh man, am I ever going to get this?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's like you can study all you want, but those tricky sounds, grammar snags, and just that overall fear of messing up can really trip you up, even for those of us who've been working on our English for quite a while.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive, to break down these common challenges, figure out why they happen, and most importantly, give you some practical tools to overcome them. So you can just relax and enjoy speaking English with more confidence and fluency.
You got it. We're talking real-world strategies that you can start using right away in everyday conversations. No more letting those little mistakes hold you back.
All right, so let's jump right in. One of the biggest culprits, I think, are filler words. Those ums, uns, and likes that sneak into our sentences. It feels like they just pop up out of nowhere.
It's so true. Everyone uses them to some extent, even native speakers. But when they become a crutch, it can really disrupt the flow of what you're saying. And honestly, even if you have brilliant ideas, it can make you sound less confident.
Okay, so what do we do instead? Because sometimes silence can feel even more awkward.
Right. It's not about becoming a perfectly silent speaking machine. It's about using pauses strategically.
Yeah.
Giving yourself a moment to think. It actually makes you sound more thoughtful and in control.
I like that, a strategic pause, so much better than an. Now, another area that can be really tough is pronunciation. English has some crazy sounds that just don't exist in many other languages.
Oh, for sure. And then you have those words with multiple syllables, and you're never quite sure where to put the stress. It's like a puzzle sometimes.
A puzzle with moving pieces. I remember when I first learned the word present, I was so confused because it can be a gift or an action, and it all depends on which syllable you emphasize. It's mind-boggling.
It really highlights how crucial rhythm and stress are in English. Getting that part right can be just as important as getting the individual sounds correct. It's all about getting that flow and musicality of the language.
And of course, we can't forget about the grammar gremlins. Tenses, articles, prepositions, oh my. It can feel like a minefield sometimes.
Yeah, grammar can be tricky. English has a lot of rules, and sometimes even more exceptions to those rules. It's no wonder that so many learners find it challenging. But the good news is, the more you practice and expose yourself to correct grammar, the more naturally it will start to come to you.
But I think, sometimes the biggest hurdle isn't even a specific grammar rule. It's that feeling of, oh gosh, I'm going to say something wrong. I'm not good enough. That inner critic that just seems to take over.
Absolutely. That fear of making mistakes can be paralyzing. And the more you worry about it, the more likely you are to actually make a mistake. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And then afterward, you're like, oh, I should have said it this way. But in the moment, you just freeze. It's like self-correction just goes out the window.
That's so common. It's great to reflect on your mistakes and learn from them, but you also need to develop that ability to catch and correct yourself as you're speaking.
Yeah.
Because the more you repeat a mistake, the more it becomes ingrained in your mind.
So we've talked about some of the common challenges that learners face. Now let's get real about how these things show up in everyday life. Let's say you're having a casual conversation with a native speaker, and they throw in some slang or an idiom you've never heard before. It can feel like they're speaking a different language altogether.
It can feel like you've suddenly been transported to another planet. But remember, those informal situations are actually gold mines for you to pick up authentic language. Don't be shy about asking what things mean. Most native speakers are more than happy to explain. It's all part of the cultural exchange.
Or what about when you have to give a presentation in English? Talk about pressure. Suddenly, even the smallest mistake can feel like a spotlight shining right on it.
Public speaking is definitely nerve-wracking for most people, even in your native language. And when you're doing it in English, it can feel even more intense. But instead of viewing those moments as failures, try to see them as valuable learning experiences.
Wait, so what if you find yourself in a group discussion or a meeting at work and everyone's talking a mile a minute? It's so easy to feel like you have to rush to keep up and then your sentences get all jumbled.
Yeah. In those fast-paced situations, it can be tempting to prioritize speed over clarity. But you know what often happens. You end up having to repeat yourself anyway. So my advice would be, it's perfectly okay to take a moment to gather your thoughts before you speak.
So it's like that old saying, slow and steady wins the race. All right, so now that we've gotten a good look at the challenges, let's switch gears and talk about solutions. We've talked about self-correction before, But how can you actually train yourself to do that in the moment?
Well, the first step is becoming more aware of your own speech patterns. Try listening to yourself as you speak. Pay attention to your pronunciation, your grammar, and even your pace. And if you catch yourself making a mistake, don't panic. Just pause briefly, mentally correct the error, and then continue speaking.
It's like having a little editor in your head. Okay, what about recording yourself? I know that can be a bit scary for some people, but is it actually helpful?
Well, it can be incredibly helpful. It allows you to hear yourself objectively without the distractions of being in the moment. And you'll often be surprised by what you notice. Maybe you didn't realize you were using so many filler words, or that you have a certain pronunciation habit that you weren't aware of.
So it's like having a playback of your own speaking. You can really pinpoint those areas where you can improve. All right, so record yourself, listen back, and then what? I'm guessing practice is key.
Practice is absolutely key. And one of the best ways to practice is through role-playing. Create scenarios for yourself, like ordering food at a restaurant, making small talk at a party, or even having a job interview. You can do this with a friend or a language partner.
And we live in a world where technology can really help us out. What are some of your favorite tech tools for English learners?
Oh, there's so many great resources available now. You've got language learning apps with speech recognition software that can give you instant feedback on your pronunciation. Online dictionaries and pronunciation guides that can help you master those tricky sounds, and virtual conversation groups where you can connect with other learners from around the world and practice your speaking in a supportive environment.
And one thing that I found really helpful is learning common English idioms and expressions, because those can really trip you up if you're not familiar with them.
Absolutely. Idioms are like the spice of the English language. They add color and nuance to your speech. But they can be confusing if you try to understand them literally. So it's important to learn them in context and practice using them naturally in conversations.
And I think one thing that many learners struggle with is that desire to be perfect right from the start. But I think you've said before that focusing on something else first is more important.
Yes, fluency is more important than perfection, especially in the beginning. It's better to get your message across, even if you make a few grammar mistakes, than to get stuck trying to construct a perfectly flawless sentence. As you become more comfortable and confident with speaking, the accuracy will naturally improve.
It's like you said, it's about being able to communicate effectively and express your ideas. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of practical techniques, but what about building that inner confidence? Because I think that plays a huge role in how fluently we speak.
Confidence is key, and one way to boost your confidence is by creating a supportive learning environment for yourself. Surround yourself with people who encourage you and who are patient with your mistakes.
Yeah, find your tribe. And that can be online too. There are so many great online communities and forums where you can connect with other English learners and support each other. It's amazing.
It really is. And setting realistic goals for yourself can also do wonders for your confidence. Instead of trying to achieve everything at once, break it down into smaller, more manageable steps, and celebrate each milestone along the way. It's all about acknowledging your progress and keeping yourself motivated.
Those small wins can really add up. But what if you've tried all these things and you're still feeling stuck? Is there anything else you would recommend?
If you're feeling like you need more personalized guidance, consider working with a language teacher or a speech coach. They can provide tailored feedback and help you create a learning plan that addresses your specific needs.
So having an expert in your corner can really make a difference. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final words of wisdom to leave our listeners with?
You know, sometimes we're our own worst critics. We get so caught up in trying to avoid mistakes that we forget to enjoy the process of learning and growing. So my final piece of advice would be kind to yourself. Embrace those mistakes as opportunities to learn. And remember, the more you speak, the more confident and fluent you will become.
Beautiful. So to wrap things up for you, remember, those common speaking mistakes are just part of the learning process. By understanding them, using practical strategies to overcome them, and most importantly, having that belief in yourself, you can absolutely achieve fluency and speak English with confidence and joy. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Speak More Fluently. Until next time, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep speaking your truth.